State Affairs with Edmond Obilo is live. Stay tuned.
Yeah.
So how did Seyi Makinde become rich?
Well, I'll probably show to you the first project that we did under Macron. I was earning maybe about equivalent of $20,000 a year with my work as a field engineer stroke assistant manager at Rebold. So when the first project we got at Macron was $1 million for, I think it was for 6 months or 1 year. And
How were you able to pull that out?
well, I've been working with ExxonMobil on dynamic measurements. You know, before then, they carry out what they call fiscalization for crude oil export from Nigeria, where they basically put a tape in the tank and then they read it off and say, well, okay, this is the amount. Based on this calculation, they will do the manual calculation and say, based on, you know, the length of the tape and the size of the tank, this is the amount of crude, you know, in this tank. And then they pump to the vessel. They pump into the vessel. But those ones, they will measure whatever it is that Nigeria is giving to them dynamically. When you produce crude oil, you have 3 parts. You have the crude itself, you have water, and you have gas. All of that mixed together. So at the flow station, you take off the gas, and you send to the terminal the crude plus the water content. So they do dehydration within the terminal. And based on that, they can now have what you say crude with minimum water content. But the problem is if I give you a gallon of petrol and it's 3/4 petrol and 1/4 water, by the time you analyze it, you only pay for the 3/4 content, which is the real crude that you've gotten. So we were able to demonstrate then to DPR, to some of the IOCs, that even with a very small percentage uncertainty, it's a lot of money, you know. So we encourage them to move from, you know, the manual method to automated system where you sample the crude as it's being sent to the ship for water content, and you also do the measurement using a flow computer. You do all the calculations. So the first IOC to buy into that was ExxonMobil. That was 1998, and they gave us that project to upgrade their, you know, metering system to include flow computers and all of that, automatic sampling system. And we did all of that. And personally, I probably walked away with maybe $300,000-$400,000. It was a lot of money.
Yeah.
For me, I was only 29.
29?
Yeah.
You were a millionaire.
Yeah.
In Naira.
Well, yeah. So I came back to Oyo State, and from that money, I went to my secondary school, Bishop Phillips Academy, and I built a block of classroom for them, equipped with computers, you know, to teach the student about computers and all of that. So that project was commissioned by late Alhaji Lamade Shina in November 2000. That came from the really first set of money that I made as an individual.
That's interesting. Your first big break, you decided to give back.
Yes.
To your alma mater.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
I did it. I did that project. I still saw the album in my father's properties, when I was going through it. The project started, I believe, started August 97. I got married February 98, and I started the Bishop Phillips Academics project, I think, late 99, and it was completed and handed over, commissioned November 2000.
So after your first financial break, how did you then make more money?
Well, we did it for ExxonMobil at Kwaibo Terminal, and then Ajip also called us. They wanted the same thing. They were standardizing it across all export terminals in Nigeria, so we did also at Escravos. We went to Texaco, then we did at Oloibiri. So it became the standard for the oil industry in Nigeria. At some point, I think our flow computers were being used, to export at least half of Nigeria's daily crude exports.
That was your rise to being a billionaire.
Well,
so Seyi Makinde is an oil man. You made your money from
apart
the
from
oil industry.
apart from oil and gas, I don't know any other thing. Again, well, okay, not politics. So I only came from the oil and gas into philanthropy, just giving back to the people, and then I got sucked into politics. Just based on that.
You almost got into Shell as a full-time staff, but that failed. So looking back today, are you happy that you were not even employed?
Well, sometimes you just don't know the path that God has designed for you. We were 8 of us that scaled through the interview. And then I was working as a contract staff for Shell because I'd already finished my youth service. So I was working out of Bonita. Incidentally, also on a metering project, a metering project for crude supply to the refinery. This was 1991, 92. We've always had the issue of accountability. I was working on the crude supply to the Port Harcourt refinery, so that once you accurately measure what you give to the refinery, when they refine and they are getting the white product out, you do material reconciliation. So I was on that project when I went for this interview, and we were 8, 7 successfully got into Shell as a permanent staff, and it didn't happen in my own case. Usually they keep you in their database for a year. So after a year and a half, they called me back and said, maybe I would like to work for them as a production supervisor. And I thought, well, look, let me just get into Shell first, because I was going out with my girlfriend then, that I thought, because our father works for Shell, if I can get into Shell, at least that would be a guarantee for her that her living standard won't be lower than what our parents were giving to her. So out of the 8, 7 got in. I did not. So they called me back, and I said, look, even if it's health and safety supervisor, let me just come in first. So at that interview, they asked me to go straight for the oral, because as of then, the written test that I did, they said was still valid, So at the oral interview, the panel asked me, after asking questions here and there, they now asked me that, look, have you done a Shell interview before? And I said, yes. And the head of the panel said, so what are you doing outside? And I said, well, you need to ask this HR guy here on that panel. So they asked him. And he said, well, okay, they've been waiting for requisition from, the unit that they're supposed to post me to and all of that. Anyway, at the end of that exercise also, the recommendation was they should wait for the requisition to come from the appropriate unit because they thought taking me as a production supervisor may mean first, it may deny someone else, of a slot. And also, in terms of a career path, they thought since I came from the core specialist group, maybe they should leave me out there. And the requisition never came. And that was the end of my Shell career.
Were you disappointed?
Yes, of course I was disappointed because in terms of a standard of living, being a Shell permanent staff, is incomparable to being a contract staff or working then for an oil servicing company. So I was disappointed. I waited again for another year. They called me for another interview, but this time around I had to start from the written. Of course, this was something that I've done before. I think I scored about 90% in the written test. And for that particular exercise, they had a upper and lower limit. If you score, I think, below 60%, you won't be considered. And if you score also above 75%, you wouldn't be considered. And I scored 90%. Yes. So I went to the HR supervisor then. I said, look, what is this? And she said to me that, look, you see, the aptitude test is supposed to test your general intellect. And if you score above 75%, it really means you're approaching a Mensa level, which is like your head is about to explode. So after that episode, I thought, look, forget Shell. I'm not even going to bother to apply, to work for Shell anymore. And I need to leave that environment and go look for something else to do. Some other parts, to the top for me, because the decision was also quite simple. Because if you're a permanent staff, then you're immediately a management staff and you'll be on the trajectory to the top. But when you're a contract staff, you're being asked to supervise people, the servicing companies that probably know even better than you. So I thought I was not on the trajectory to, getting to the top by not being a permanent staff. And also, in terms of learning, I was also lagging behind because I am supervising people that they know a lot better than me. So I thought, okay, at least I can get out of here and go look for opportunities where I can learn as quickly as possible and have something that I can offer the industry. And that was when I took the decision to join Rebuild as a field engineer. And that gave me the exposure. It wasn't Shell anymore. My first project was with Ajib. Then they sent me to Texaco, and then within 2 years, I was the assistant manager for the Eket operations, and that was it. It gave me the confidence to just get into the industry and do my own thing. So within 3 years of taking that decision, I already set up Macon Engineering, and I couldn't even tell people that I was the founder. On my card, then I put operations manager because I walked into people's offices and then you're asking them to trust you with millions of dollars worth of project, and then they're looking at me like this 29-year-old guy. We don't know what he can do, and you notice from this administration, my experience from how I started very early made me, to have absolute trust in our youngsters. So you see around me, most of my folks, they are really, really young, and they've been carrying those responsibilities very well.
I see.